away from local governments who have been leading the way on energy progress for decades due to the lack of action from our Florida legislature and our government cabinet. Cities and counties across the state are scrambling to figure out how this will impact their plans. Their local clean energy commitments and warming carbon pollution mitigation plans will be nullified. As the Florida legislature attacks clean renewable energy, they simultaneously pass a budget to allocate billions of dollars towards sea level rise and flooding adaptation work at the expense of affordable housing funds. But these funds will be wasted if we refuse to address what is causing rising seas and temperatures to rise, which is heat trapping, climate warming, greenhouse gas emissions from dirty, polluting energy sources. There were dozens of good bipartisan bills filed this session to increase solar and solar battery storage, set renewable clean energy goals, create more sustainable and efficient infrastructure for schools and hurricane shelters. But most of these bills did not even get a committee hearing. We are the Sunshine State, and before the pandemic, solar had been the fastest growing job sector in our state. And as our state economy begins to recover, I think of all the jobs that could have been created if the state legislature would have let locals lead by expanding energy options and creating a more resilient and sustainable community for all. The good news is we finally have a plan to address the climate emergency that will also return much needed jobs to this area. The American Jobs Fund includes $2 trillion in investment in clean energy and infrastructure. It is ambitious, and it can provide people that belong to the most vulnerable communities with 40% of the benefits of rebuilding our infrastructure while making our state more resilient to increasingly destructive storms and rising sea levels. Almost 40% of the state's budget is from federal funds, and it's good to know that members of Congress like Congresswoman Chair Castor are ready to pass comprehensive legislation to protect public health, expand clean energy options, and create a just climate resilient future for Florida. And with that, I have the honor to introduce Congresswoman Kathy Castor, representing Florida's 14th Congressional District and the chair of the Select Committee of the Climate Crisis, to join us. Congresswoman, welcome.
Well, good afternoon, and thank you, Yelka. It's a pleasure to be with you today, or maybe it's a pleasure to be with you, but this is a very concerning topic. And I want to thank you and Aliki, everyone at Florida Conservation Voters, and my good friend, Mayor Rick Kreisman, for standing up for clean energy and everything that we need to be doing to confront the climate crisis. We're here today to urge Governor DeSantis to veto HB 919 that passed the Florida legislature. It preempts and prevents cities, counties, and citizens from restricting dirty energy sources like frack gas. It really throws a wrench into expanding solar and updating building codes to provide cost-saving energy efficiency measures. Yelka is right. Our planet is warming due to burning fossil fuels, and climate change is causing dire impacts, not just to the state of Florida, but all across the globe. It's increasing costs on our neighbors, and it's more apparent every single day, especially here in Florida. But the good news is that there have been communities like the city of St. Petersburg, city of Tampa, Orlando, others, Miami. There have been states and countries banding together to expand renewable energy, create jobs, and adopt cost-saving energy efficiency measures. Many of these local communities are moving in that direction, and they were more poised to do so here in Florida. Well, what happened? The dirty fuel industries like ExxonMobil, Tampa Electric Company, Duke Energy, FP&L, they didn't like that. So in a power play, this legislative session, they pressed the Florida legislature to tie the hands of consumers and local communities from working to expand clean energy and actually make a preference to frack gas. This is so short-sighted. And in doing so, what these companies are doing are adding costs to the bottom line of our local communities. They are adding cost onto what citizens pay for their fuel costs. and it puts our state at a competitive disadvantage. The fastest growing sector in energy related jobs is in renewable energy. And meanwhile, we also understand that the health impacts of dirty air, dirty fuels are costing lives, and they are increasing costs on families as well. So the last thing that vulnerable Florida should be doing is doing the bidding of the dirty fuel industries and their lobbyists who do not have our best interest at heart. You're right, Yoka, in Congress, my colleagues have asked me to lead the House Select Committee on the climate crisis. So I have a front row seat to the jobs being created all across the country in clean energy and the investments being made in those communities. 38 out of 50 states have clean energy and cost-saving energy efficiency goals. They're working for healthier and cleaner communities. So why not Florida? Well, big money continues to call the shots in the Florida legislature. The special interests rule over the public interest. These dirty fuel companies think it is fine to pocket more money while everyday Floridians pay more. It is not right, and the governor should veto this misguided bill. Meanwhile, in Congress, we are really working on the clean energy future, in creating jobs in renewable energy and conserving our lands, making our communities more resilient. We intend to hammer out the American Jobs Plan. And I would hate for Florida to miss the boat on a lot of these investments because of these draconian laws that they're passing at the state level because of the big money special interest of the dirty fuel industries. So one other point before I turn it back to you, Florida should diversify its energy supply for other reasons too. I think we've all seen what has happened just over the weekend when hackers got into the Colonial Pipeline and have been able to shut off the gas pipeline and gas supply to the Northeast. See, Florida is dangerously reliant on frack gas. Right now, our energy production is 75% tied to frack gas. That's a very dangerous recipe. Plus, when you look at what happened in Texas in the late winter, early spring, that catastrophe where the frack gas pipelines froze because of a climate-fueled strange weather event. Florida is really, because we're so reliant on that frack gas, we are in a very dangerous position if gas prices go up or if something happens to those pipelines. So another reason that we should double down on renewable energy, solar power, more energy efficiency, put money back into the pockets of our neighbors, and unleash this incredible clean energy economy that would increase jobs throughout the Sunshine State. So again, I urge Governor DeSantis to veto the bill, and I'm so proud to be here with other clean energy champions today. Thanks so much.
Thank you, Congresswoman. You're so right. And not only we rely so much on frack methane gas, but we send billions of dollars out of state to bring that gas in when we could be really energy independent here in the Sunshine State. So I appreciate those comments. I'd like to hear from Mayor Kreisman, who's a clean energy champion, how he feels about this bill and give the floor to him so he can really weigh in how, at the local level, what does that mean for you and the city of St. Petersburg? Welcome, Mayor Kreisman.
Well, thank you, Yoka, and thank you to the Clio Institute for hosting this today. Special thanks to my longtime friend, Congresswoman Castor, who has been a champion of issues related to climate and our environment for as long as I've ever known her. I remember standing on a beach with her as we were talking about the dangers of offshore drilling after the Deepwater Horizon spill, and doing everything that we could together to try and prevent anything like that from ever happening off our coast again, putting our entire state at risk again, and especially when we're talking about an energy source that is just so bad for the environment. So I just want to thank her for everything that she's doing for us in Washington to fight the good fight for us. This is just yet another bill that's coming from Tallahassee that hurts cities. It is absolutely a barrier to our efforts at providing a cleaner and greener future for our city. But it should be predictable who's been behind this. As the Congresswoman mentioned, the Florida Petroleum Association, the Natural Gas Association, the National Utility Contractors Association. All of those organizations have been given preference over the people of Florida and Florida's environment. And it was more than a decade ago when I was serving in the state legislature that I filed and sponsored legislation to establish a renewable energy standard. Not surprisingly, back then it didn't pass and didn't even get a hearing. And so we sit here today, Florida being one of 12 states in the country that doesn't have a renewable energy standard or even a voluntary renewable standard. And so, it's having to fall on local governments. And we've been the ones that have been having to do the heavy lifting when it comes to addressing this challenge of climate and sea level rise. I committed our city with an executive order that by 2035, we'd be 100% renewable. I was first city in Florida to make that commitment. We committed by 2050 to reduce our CO2 emissions by 80%. And I'm involved along with Mayor Eric Garcetti in LA and Frank County in Des Moines in something called the City's Race to Zero, which is our effort to get 1,000 cities from around the country and around the world to sign on that we will do everything within our power to meet the Paris agreements, that shoot for that 1.5 degrees Celsius. And not just have goals, but actually implement actions. And that's where what Tallahassee is doing is going to make it so much more challenging and make the lift so much heavier for all of us throughout the state of Florida. I'm not as confident that we're going to be able to hit our goal of 100% clean and renewable by 2035 because of this legislation. It's certainly going to make it that much more challenging for us. We were looking at requiring new construction of housing and offices to include EV readiness and solar readiness. And this legislation says we can't do that. Simple things like that. So no more mandates. So now we've got to figure out how in the world do we incentivize enough to make a difference and hit our goals. So, like most things that have come out of the governor's office or the Florida legislature, again, this bill is also overly broad. It's poorly written. It's vague. And there's just tons of room for interpretation. So I want to thank all of you who are standing up and encouraging the governor to veto this, who are speaking loudly. Hopefully we can bring some common sense and get him to understand that the future of this state, if he cares about economic development, if he cares about tourism, you got to care about our environment. You got to care about climate change. Because if you don't, and you allow this to go into law and you sign this, you are dooming the state. I don't know how to say it any simpler than that. So appreciate the opportunity to be on with you all today.
Thank you, Mayor, for those words. And we're going to get into Q&A shortly. But before we do so, I'd like to invite my colleague and a great friend, the Executive Director of the Florida Conservation Voters, to offer some final remarks before we get to questions. Aliki Moncrief, please, you have the floor.
Thanks so much, Yoka. I'm so grateful to the invitation from Clio Institute to participate. Great to be on stage, on panel with two amazing champions of our environment and our climate, Congresswoman Castor and Mayor Kreisman. We're not in the same town, but from Tallahassee, we're always rooting you on at Florida Conservation Voters. We at Florida Conservation Voters were one of more than a dozen clean energy and climate justice organizations who have sent a letter to the governor asking him to veto this very harmful energy preemption bill that we've been talking about today. And as you said, Mayor Kreisman and Rep. Castor, we're calling on him to show that he is really committed to Florida's environment and that he is committed to Florida's local communities by vetoing these bills. Mayor Kreisman, you mentioned how vaguely this new law is written. It is incredibly vague. And the problem with that is that it makes it almost impossible to really define what the ultimate impacts will be, what the ultimate negative scope will be. It applies to any local decisions that will have the effect of restricting the use of any type of fuel. So the questions that pop in our minds, are counties or cities going to be able to raise fuel taxes under this language? Will they be able to require more protections for underground storage tanks that are potentially threatening sensitive environmental areas? Are local governments going to be able to drive more ambitious clean energy policies? Those are all questions that this set of bills creates. What we do know for certain, though, is that this bill will become a lightning rod for litigation that exposes local municipalities to a host of unanticipated, highly destabilizing and costly legal impacts. Mayor Kreisman, you mentioned that it puts an additional burden on incentivizing. Well, when local governments have to incentivize, that costs money, that costs resources. And so whether we're talking about litigation costs, whether we're talking about the actual costs of providing incentives for clean energy, on multiple fronts, this bill just makes it that much harder for local governments to lead the way. The second thing that's really clear, and I think we've kind of touched on it in this panel, so it makes sense maybe in closing remarks, is that this bill undermines consumer choice. Florida is an incredibly diverse state. Some people actually remark that we're multiple states wrapped into one. I've heard that one before. And so a one-size-fits-all approach to energy just isn't good for our communities. Local governments must be able to elevate clean and affordable energy options for their residents. Unfortunately, as our panelists have noted, it's not a unique law to Florida. This is a part of a national effort by the fossil fuel industry to prevent local governments from modernizing our energy infrastructure. We've seen bills like this in many other states. Fortunately here, as these bills move through the legislature, we saw more than 4,500 individual people stepping up to voice their concerns. They are now calling on the governor to veto HB 919 and SB 896. We join them in doing so, and just want to thank everybody for being here today. I'm excited about the questions and answers.
Thank you, Aliki, and thank you, everybody. Please raise your hands. We will unmute yourself or put your questions in the chat. We'd like to get to all of them. So Laura Cassels asks, please explain what is at risk in Florida in terms of missing the vote of the American Jobs Plan. And I think there's no better person to answer that than Congresswoman Castor.
Well, thank you very much for the question. The American Jobs Plan is, we're poised to make significant investments in clean energy jobs. It's expanding those jobs in solar, offshore wind, plugging abandoned wells, making our communities more resilient. So if Florida doubles down on frack gas as our energy supply, and they are prohibiting local communities from updating simple things like their building codes on energy efficiency, and they're expanding that frack gas infrastructure, those companies are going to say, well, where do we go across the country to target those investments? But here's what I'm hopeful for. I think at the national level in the American Jobs Plan, if we can pass a clean energy standard for America to say, okay, we're going to generate X percent of our electricity from renewable or carbon-free sources in 2030 and 2040, that could have an impact on Florida and kind of, we're going to have a lot of carrots and sticks. That might be a carrot and a stick together. But see, we'll be starting farther behind because so many other states now are already well on their way to their clean energy goals. But this is also very important to our health. We know that these dirty fuel sources, the particulate matter impacts folks with asthma, impacts folks on the front lines. So stay tuned as we hammer this out. I hope Governor DeSantis vetoes this bill. If he signs it and he does the bidding again of the dirty fuel industry, rather than siding with the public and our local communities, that'll just spur us on to make sure that we have the policies in place through the American Jobs Plan, the Biden and Harris administration, to make sure that we're on the right track when it comes to clean energy.
Thank you for that. And I think it's at the same time very contradictory and senseless. You're investing billions of dollars in adaptation, but you are actually reverting things that will prohibit or curb those rising temperatures related events like rising seas, stronger storms, and things that are affecting our communities and affecting our economy and our tourism. So it just seems very contradictory coming from our legislature and our governor. We have another question. Please expand on billions going out of the state in support of current fuel sources. Aliki, would you want to touch up on that? And I think that's related to the comment that I made about all the billions of dollars that Florida sent away on frack gas.
Right. Yeah, I'm happy to. And Representative Castor noted that 75%, I think, of our power in Florida actually comes from fracked gas. So we are a net importer of fracked gas. Most of our electric power plants throughout the state, that's how we generate our electricity. And we're not even talking about the transportation sector. So I think in terms of those dollars, we are spending billions of dollars to import a dirty fossil fuel when instead we really should be investing in building up more clean energy options like solar energy. Solar energy has the benefits, not just of being a clean energy source, but the jobs that it takes to install those facilities, to put those panels on homes, to build the utility scale solar facilities. All those jobs stay in Florida, and those are well-paying jobs. So hopefully that helps to elucidate a little bit on the billions that we're spending on energy we shouldn't be spending.
Absolutely, and it's important to note that for every job in the fossil fuel industry, we have 3 to 4 jobs in the clean renewable energy sector. So well said. Thank you, Aliki. And this question is for Congresswoman Castor from Bruce Ritchie, even political. He says that state Republican leaders say Florida, instead of pointing fingers, is taking action on resiliency and coastal flooding. How do you respond?
Well, thank goodness we passed the American Rescue Plan. A lot of the funds that are going to support our environmental causes, like closing Piney Point, that toxic stew that was flowing into beautiful Tampa Bay, that's going to be fixed thanks to the American Rescue Plan. It was good to see the state ante up finally for wildlife corridors in the state. Again, that's thanks to the American Rescue Plan. Unfortunately, I didn't really hear them thank President Biden and the Democrats in Congress who sent those funds to the state, but we know. And then when it comes to what we need to do looking forward, you cannot just keep paying for resilience. As Aliki said, you can't adapt your way out of this. You have to get to the root cause, and that's dramatic reduction in carbon pollution and other greenhouse gases. You probably saw President Biden a couple of weeks ago convened the major world economies, all of the world leaders, and brought them together and said, we've all got to up our ambition heading into the Glasgow Conference of Parties in the fall. This is the kind of leadership that we need. And we see it as an enormous opportunity to create jobs that can't be outsourced. When you're building the modern transmission grid across America, those are good paying American jobs. If we could expand solar energy and more energy efficiency in the state of Florida, that would be a huge economic boon to us. Plus, we're so vulnerable, we continue to pay out massive amounts for climate fuel disasters. I know we're all a little bit fearful this summer now that NOAA has upped its range of temperatures on what they're calling normal. We know the Gulf of Mexico is a lot warmer. The storms, the scientists tell us, will intensify faster. Our insurance market right now is very shaky. Unless we take dramatic action and reduce our greenhouse gases, our reliance on fossil fuels to power our cars and our homes, Florida is going to be particularly hurt. It's going to cost us a whole lot. So you can't simply invest in resilience. You have got to make dramatic steps in reducing carbon pollution. Florida has enormous potential when it comes to solar power. We're the sunshine state. But now I think folks are going to call us, oh, you're the frack gas state, not the sunshine state. That would be a real shame.
Absolutely. I like to I just point out that we are at 2:00 and want to know if the chairwoman and the mayor can stay just a couple more minutes. If not, we can end the call. Okay, great. ¿Alguna pregunta en español para los miembros de la prensa en español? Podemos también responder sus preguntas en español y traducirlas. But just wanted to add to the question that Bruce Ritchie said. You know, I heard a very well-known climate scientist said that resilience and innovations are the thoughts and prayers of climate inaction. So while it is very much needed that we need to prepare our cities and our communities to be climate ready and future ready, we cannot avoid what the root of the cause is. It's trying to mop a floating bathroom floor without turning off the faucet. It's just senseless and contradictory. So thank you so much for those remarks. Any other questions before we end our call today? Okay. I think we answered everybody's question. Thank you so much. Oh, there's one for Mayor Kreisman. Yes. Mayor, are you confident that the state has the authority to preempt you? Does home rule have no power anymore?
Well, it certainly, it feels like there's been an all-out assault on home rule, in particular this year. I mean, I spent 6 years in Tallahassee and there was always preemptions, but I've never seen a year quite like this one, where they were as far-reaching and as empowering for the legislature and depowering for cities as this year. You know, and whether it's COVID, which the governor just signed, which obviously dramatically impacts our ability to do things to keep our communities safe. And hopefully if he doesn't sign this one, which again will dramatically impact our ability to keep our communities safe, this time safe from climate change and rising seas. So I will tell you that, you know, my city, along with cities all over the state, we are looking at the preemptions that have been filed and the grouping of them, and to see if we believe that we can challenge them, partly for being unconstitutional, also home rule violations. Truthfully, one of my biggest concerns is, you know, if we're able to make it through lower court and appellate court, where does it go from there? It goes to our state Supreme Court, who was appointed by this governor. You know, that's the old wolf guarding the hen house. So even if we challenge, I'm not entirely comfortable that we'd be able to get through the appeals process successfully, because the deck has been so stacked in their favor. But we are looking at that to see what, if anything, we can do, because our ability to do what's best for our residents, who we know better than they do in Tallahassee, has been pretty dramatically impacted.
Thank you so much. Chair Castro, last words before we close our call today?
Yeah, thank you all so much. So everyone, rally with us to urge Governor DeSantis to veto this bill, House Bill 919, that preempts your local community from making changes on how they power your community. It's an very unfortunate power play by the dirty fuel industry, our investor-owned utilities, and the Petroleum and Gas Association. They do not have the public interest at heart. They have their profits at heart. They're quite willing to pass along increased cost to consumers, and it's wrong. if they are successful in preventing communities from tapping the clean and free power of the sun, and instead double down on these dirty gas, this expansion of frack gas, we're all going to pay the price. And as Mayor Kreisman said so well, and thanks again, Rick, for being such a champion for St. Petersburg, the local community on clean energy, we have got to move away from the carbon pollution. Our lives depend on it, and we have a moral obligation to our kids and future generations to do it now. So I urge the governor to veto this bill, and thanks to the champions who are up there fighting in Tallahassee all the way along.
Thank you so much. Well, with that, we're going to end the call. Thank you, Congresswoman Castor. Thank you, Mayor Kreisman, for being here. Thank you, Aliki from Florida Conservation Voters, and for all the members of the press for caring about this topic. We'll follow up with a press release, and I appreciate you supporting our efforts. Thank you so much. Have a great day, everyone.